very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show, Dan Moisand, who, like me, is a certified financial planner. And I discovered him because I was reading an article that he wrote on Market Watch, which is the personal finance site of the Wall Street Journal. Dan is a retire mentor there, and he wrote an article about the penalties that people get when they take money out of their retirement plans early. So, Dan, can you tell us what the rules are about that?
Sure. The basic rule is that distributions prior to age 59 and a half are subject to an additional 10% penalty on top of whatever income taxes apply to that distribution.
So just to simplify, if a person takes out 100 and he's in the 30% tax bracket, he'll take out 100, he'll pay $30 in tax, and then he'll pay another 10 as a penalty?
Exactly right.
So what do you recommend when people are saying, Dan, I need to get some money and my IRA is full of it?
Yeah, the first thing that we want to do is we want to see if they're eligible for any exemptions from the 10% penalty. And the exemptions are a little bit different with IRAs than they are for 401ks, but there's a lot of similarities. Some of them are obviously things we don't recommend or want to take advantage of, like the exemption for being totally disabled or dying. That's a bad one. Mm-hmm. But if somebody is looking to make certain payments for qualified higher education expenses, there's availability to get money out of the IRA without that penalty. First-time homebuyer exemption also exists, but that only covers up to $10,000. Health insurance premiums, if you're unemployed, are also exempt from the 10% penalty. So the $100 you described earlier that we take out, you wouldn't pay that 10% penalty. You only pay the regular income tax on that.
And in a case, for example, like you're unemployed, you would likely be in a low tax bracket too.
Correct.
So that wouldn't hurt you so much. Is it smart to take the money from the IRA, or would you tell the person, let's look for other sources of money before we go there?
Yeah, we would definitely look for other sources. I mean, the reason the penalty tax exists in the first place is because they want to have an incentive to keep the money in the accounts until what's more of a traditional retirement age. Taking money out of an IRA or a 401k early damages the amount of money that's going to be available later on in retirement when somebody leaves the workforce on a permanent basis. So we would look to other sources if possible.
And how about when people have the opportunity to borrow against their retirement plan?
Yeah, you cannot borrow against an IRA. You can borrow against some 401ks and other qualified plans if the plan has that provision within it. And this is a key starting point for any evaluation of what can and can't be done, is to get a thing called the summary plan description for your particular 401k plan. Because there are rules that are sent down from the federal government about how these plans operate, but there are certain things that are allowed, but they have to actually be in the plan for somebody to take advantage of them. And a loan is one of them. A loan generally is a very bad idea as far as retirement planning goes for a lot of reasons. They're very limited. Number one, up to 50% of your balance, up to $50,000 is the cap. It's paid back with after-tax money, which sounds like, oh, gee, I'm paying myself this interest, but that's really not the case. It's costing you a lot of money to get that money paid back. And if anything happens to your employment, you quit, you're fired, whatever the case may be, that loan becomes due very quickly. And if it isn't paid, it becomes a distribution, which means it's taxable. And of course, if you're under 59 and a half, you get whacked with the 10% penalty. Mm-hmm. So when you do projections of what happens to an accumulation with a loan and without a loan is always way better than taking a loan.
Got it. And I think one of the point you raise is that if you were to lose your job, you might have to very quickly repay the loan. And of course, that's just the time when you don't have the free money. So certainly borrowing against a 401k is probably not the first place you want to go looking for money. We're talking with Dan Moisand, who is a certified financial planner. He's a specialist in dealing with people in their pre and and post-retirement years, helping them to develop some good strategies. Dan, one of the other things I'd like to dive into a little bit is a Social Security strategy when people are looking to retire early. A lot of times people say, hey, I'm thinking of retiring and I could start already today getting my Social Security. And then they say, but everyone says the longer you wait, the more money you'll get. How can people make that decision?
Yeah, the decision is really a life expectancy decision as much as it is a cash flow decision. If you have other sources of potential cash flow that would allow you to wait, and you or your spouse is expected to live until the person with the larger benefit would have been about 81, it pays off to at least delay that one larger benefit. It's much simpler with a single. It's just straight life expectancy thing. If you expect to live past 81 and you can fund retirement until then, it's going to pay off delaying Social Security as long as possible, up to age 70. Mm-hmm. The lower of the two benefits in a married couple, that's a bet on really when both people are going to live. If both people live long enough, then it'll pay off to delay that one also to age 70. Yeah. So, but as far as types of, if you want to turn it into a quote investment, when you compare that to the return you would get from other things that don't involve market risks like stocks, it becomes a very, very good deal the longer you live past that 81-ish age.
Mm-hmm. But of course, the trade-off is if you don't, then you end up losing it. And there are those people who are a little more pessimistic about the whole future of Social Security. So I think it's beyond the scope of our discussion today. But it is true that if Social Security were to do like they say may end up having to do, which is to pay 75 cents on the dollar in the future, then you would have been better off taking the money earlier because you would have gotten more.
Correct.
Yeah, definitely a big gamble. Let's talk about other things people can do if they want to retire early. They want to make sure they'll have some income stream. And in today, with interest rates so low, it's very hard to find a safe way to invest your money and assume that you're going to get some sort of long-term income. Any great ideas?
Yeah, that's a challenging one. The first thing I'd say about that is the idea of just living off interest is clearly not plausible at this point in time. But if we go back and we look at the history of investment markets, it really didn't work for very long at any other time in the past either. When interest rates are higher, they're higher for a reason. And they're usually higher because of a combination of higher tax rates and higher inflation. So I think that was always kind of a myth. It's just that now interest rates are so pitiful here in the United States, it's more crystal clear that was never a good idea. I think a better approach is to take a more of a total return look at your investment assets. I mean, it really doesn't matter where your cash flow comes from, whether it's explicit interest from a CD or whether it's a capital gain from selling something like a stock fund. And I think you're better off in the long run by having a mix of a lot of different types of assets and be kind of agnostic as to where the cash flow comes explicitly.
Mm-hmm. So how do you answer someone who gives you the what if scenario? He says, okay, great. What if I'm 60 years old and I do a 40-60 split, 40% in stocks and 60% in bonds, and then the market crashes? What's going to happen to me? Yeah,
what I usually want people to do is not say if to that, to say when. In a crash, there's I don't know what the formal definition of crash is, but anytime the market's going to go down. The market goes down typically at least 5% every year, more than once. It goes down more than 10% on average every other year. That doesn't mean every other year like clockwork, but it's a very frequent event. 20% declines happen around once every 5 to 6 years-ish on average. So if you're retiring at 60 and you're healthy, you're looking at what, 25, 30, 35 years of being involved in financial markets if you need to draw something from your assets. So it's not a matter of if these things are going to happen, it's a matter of when. So you can stress test it. You can't go back and say, okay, the last time we had a really bad event was what, 08, 09. It was minus 50% for stocks. What does that look like? Where would I draw my cash flow? And if you're balanced and you're well diversified, you wouldn't be in a position where you'd be forced to sell out of the stocks, which is how you lose money. So whether or not you could stomach that kind of decline or not is another issue. And if that's not the case, my recommendation is usually don't put more pressure on the portfolio. It's to look at other levers that you can pull that might help alleviate some of that downside concern. But a 40-60 portfolio certainly is not going to be as volatile as something that's 80-20. And so that's the first thing you should be looking at, is that balance between stocks and bonds, cash.
Yeah, I think the asset allocation really is the main thing you can control, because you can't control what's going to happen in the markets, and you can't control how smart you're going to be or how good your prophecy is going to be at picking the next greatest fund or ETF or stock or money manager or retirement planner, because no one can really guarantee any returns in the markets. And I think you're leading to a very good point. Dan, unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but I know you write a lot, you share a lot of great information. So in the last few seconds, can you just tell people how they can follow you and follow your work?
Sure. The best way to get information about me and my firm is through the website, moisandfitzgerald.com. That's MOISAND, Fitzgerald.com.
Okay, and we will put a link to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Dan Moisand, thanks so much for your time.
Sure, my pleasure.
You are listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.